minute mark in there. We're able to hear some of the lap splits, and it sounds like early on he was right on mark and maybe even just sliding a little back, but conservative on the start. Laps, early on he was right on mark and maybe just sliding a little back, but conservative on the start. Laps, early on he was right on mark and maybe just sliding a little back, but conservative on the start. These two. That's it.
So I'm listening to his lap times right now, and remember, he's got to make 18.1 to beat the record, but 18.2 he will not beat the record. So it's very, very tenuous. So he's riding slightly uneven lap times. Of course, at the beginning of the record attempt, you might be slightly behind. Let's listen again. He's shooting for 8.2 and 8.1 is 18.1 and 18.2. Is that 8.0? I'm looking for 8.0 because 8.0 is hyper fast.
Right, and that's not sustainable and not something you want.
Let's listen again. 8.2. So 8.2 is spot on his schedule. Now, to calculate how fast he needs to ride, he has to actually do 8.1.8, which is 18.18. That would make him beat the record. However, there's an interesting point to the hour record, which is the first few laps you're slower. So the first lap will be approximately Matteo is giving us the time so we can understand. So he's just done another 8.0. So these times are coming in faster than his schedule.
Which is a big problem because you can have a lot of nervous energy.
Well, it's a question. It's a question. So you're excited, but you don't want to go too fast. So as Ken points out, it might be a problem. I'm excited because he's ahead of the schedule, but that could be his undoing. Ken?
Yeah, I mean, you have so much put into this. He's been training so hard. He's had a really good year. He took a world time trial title for the Masters category, so the form. And if he goes out just a little bit too early, too fast in the couple laps because it seems doable, we'll have to watch for that in the final 15 minutes. And we're only about 7 or 8 minutes in.
We're only a few minutes in.
Yeah.
Again, what's interesting is you lose about 6 seconds to 8 seconds the first lap because you have to start. In Mike's pursuit, essentially in a pursuit, you want to get up to speed as fast as possible because you only have 3 minutes. Whereas in the hour record, you don't want to go into oxygen debt. You don't want to go anaerobic. You don't want to go too hard the first lap, the first 2 laps. So it actually takes 3 or 4 laps to get up to full speed. Don't forget, he's going to average almost 50 kilometers an hour. That's just under 31, 32 miles an hour. You can't get to that in a steady state right away.
If you leave a little bit behind, if you go too conservative, which it doesn't look like is the case today, then it might be really difficult to reclaim that. So if anything, we're right close to schedule. We don't know cumulatively, but maybe a little bit ahead. So we're certainly.
Let's listen again. If Matteo can hear us. I think I heard 8.2 and the last one was 8.0. So he's bouncing around a little bit. This is a shorter track than in Colorado. Colorado is a 333 meter track. This is only a 250. So, but he's bouncing around a little bit. It's a much steeper bank track, so it's harder to ride. But he's in Colorado, he was almost spot on his schedule, never deviating more than 1/10 of 1 second. Whereas now he's deviating 1 or 2/10 of a second almost every lap, which seems a little more volatile than in Colorado.
And this is just on feel, right, Paul? Because if he was to use a watt meter, that would be easier for him to just kind of really measure the ability. But right now, it's all by feel.
Yeah, exactly. And Ken, you bring up a good point. Is in the world hour record UCI rules, you're not allowed to use any biofeedback. You're not allowed to use any watts meters, any heart rate meters, any speedometers. So a lot of fans have said, what's that guy? Why did they have that guy yelling out the times? The guy yelling the times is Greg's friend, an Italian coach, Matteo Cigalia, and he's giving him the lap times to tell if he's ahead or above his planned time.
So that's really it. I mean, you literally are, every lap, you can just totally feel if you're going a little bit too quick or a little bit too slow, and then you can verify it with the information you get from coach on the side. So that's really just kind of a, you know, a fine line that he's so dialed in with his training, and is racing with the Irish elite record last year, and then his time trial performance at Worlds this year, taking the gold medal for Master Worlds. So there's no question that he knows how to ride at a steady pace. He has to really fine tune it. And on some of those road events, you do have the technology with you, but here you won't have any of that.
Yeah, here's another great point I wanted to talk about is, so Kenny, previously you said the fact that he was going a little faster, Alto Zero. So again, it sounds like he's doing very fast laps. I was actually at his record attempt in Colorado Springs, and one of the things that happened was the first 20 minutes, it looked like he wasn't even sweating. Mm-hmm. He looked like it was easy, and I was like, man, this is too easy. You could go way faster. And then the next 20 minutes, he looked a little stressed. He looked like he was doing a time trial, but he didn't look like he was going to fail either. The last 20 minutes, he tried to raise the pace 3 times, and he was only able to raise it for 1 or 2 laps by a few tenths of a second, and then he had to fall back to his pace. When he got off his bike, he couldn't walk. Right. So it looked extremely easy the first 20 minutes, a little hard the second 20 minutes, and the last 20 minutes, he almost blew up.
And so with our feed here, we're not in Mexico. You were at that one last year in Colorado Springs. That was on November 21st. Are you able to kind of gauge, because we're about 10 minutes in. So when you talk 20-minute opening third, middle 20 minutes and final, we're halfway through the first third of the race, the first period. So it's pretty hard to say.
Now I just heard Otto Tre. It's hard to say how he's feeling. We don't have that good a view of him on the track. Again, we hope that he didn't go out too early. He has been in Mexico for about 3 weeks. In Colorado, Mexico's a little higher than Colorado. Another big... I just heard Matteo, maybe Matteo, if you could, you broke up a little. I was trying to get that time check you gave him. Matteo's giving him a time check for the first time period. I think it was for the first.
And he's not too responsive to our requests for additional information because his hands are pretty full right now.
Yeah, Matteo's of course focused on Greg and the track, but he'll have an exact schedule that he'll need to go. The total number of laps he needs to do is 197 and a little change. And what they do is you have to ride the whole last lap to the finish line. Mm-hmm. But they shoot a gun when the hour is up, right. And then they measure your average time to the finish. So you have to keep sprinting for another 5 or 10 or 15 seconds
on
the last lap.
And
then they take your average on that lap to calculate how far you did on the hour.
And we're hoping certainly that the distance that he needs to go is eclipsed much earlier.
Yeah, ideally you'd want to have a full lap early so you're not sprinting to try to beat the average in the last second. But you never know, it could be very close.
So again, going back to that event last year that you were able to beat to, it was the Irish elite record, and he rode 46, almost 47 kilometers, 46.895 kilometers. Just to put that into context, we're talking 28, 29 miles. I mean, for an average adult, most adults untrained can ride a bicycle 12 miles an hour. Most people that put a little bit into it, maybe 14 to 16. And then racing cyclists, most training rides we would do over the years, probably 17 to 22 miles an hour is a pretty good speed. A lot of the races we did were with packs, and you can go 23 to 28 miles an hour. A lot easier when with a pack, but now obviously we're talking no pacing, no drafting, one rider all by himself. Just about, we'll be coming up on 15 minutes here shortly.
And again, I'm going to make an appeal. Matteo, if you can hear us, if you could post those little texts of the lap times or of his, where we are, based against
Yeah,
the schedule.
I mean, he's got 16, 17 seconds free every lap that he has to give out the information to Greg, and then he should be available to us, right?
Right. Well, the other thing is that at the commissaire's desk at the finish line, there will be a computer. The lap times will be recorded by computer, and they'll get his average lap times that he's doing. But again, one of the things that he has to make up is he's got to make up that start deficit. So he's got about 6 to 8 seconds for the first lap, 3 to 4 seconds for the second lap, and probably 1 to 2 seconds that he's short his full speed on the first 3 or 4 laps. Ooh, 8-5. So now that was a little slower lap. Hopefully he's not dying already. Let's listen for the next lap time. Uh-oh, was that Otto-say? Now, I'm trying to listen for the lap time. If that was Otto-say, that would be a slow lap time. It's possible that he's losing the pace.
In the current record, Norm Elvis holds at
49.392.
So that's kind of the benchmark for today. I mean, he did a really good ride last year. He seems to have gone out a little bit quicker than your analogy of the relaxed start from last year, but we can't tell for sure just yet.
Exactly. Another thing, I know I read something that Alex Dowsett, who set a record only to be eclipsed by Bradley Wiggins, which is the current UCI all men's elite record of 54. He actually said he started extremely slowly, and he disagreed with his coach. He thought it was too slow. Then he said he just about made it at the end. So a lot of riders do try to go out a little easier at the start and then to try to settle into the event and then get a little faster at the end.
And again, the pedigree that we talked about since that record ride last year, he took both Irish national championships for the time trial and the road event this year, the Masters Nationals, and then went on to Worlds in France a few months ago. And in the 50 to 54 category, Greg won the time trial. So he is a world champion for the Masters category this stage for the time trial. And he's trying to just carry that good form into today's ride. And as you said, Paul, 3 dedicated weeks of preparation on site, and certainly a lot more even before that.
Right. Now, one thing is he did have some additional time in Colorado to acclimatize to the altitude. Aguas Calientes, I believe, is about 6,500 feet, or I think you said 1,850 meters. I think that's a little higher than Colorado Springs. Aguas Calientes is also very, very hot and humid. Now, interestingly enough, that's an advantage to a pursuit record or a kilometer time trial record, because the physiological effects of the heat and humidity are not felt until further into the event.
So for about a half hour ago, Mike McCarthy's ride were ideal conditions, you're saying?
Yeah, and it's ideal in that heat and humidity actually make the air thinner and easier to penetrate, but then it makes it harder to sustain that effort for the full hour. So
if you're just joining us here right now, we welcome you and say thank you. It's Paul Swinand up here with myself, Ken LeBay, and Paul's brother Greg, twin brother, is out there riding, and he's past the quarter of the way in. And we're trying to get some information on where we are, but we do know that the pace is something that he's just about right on based on the coach's splits. We would see and hear panic in his voice if things weren't going well. And if you're just joining us, about a half hour ago, U.S. rider Mike McCarthy set a new 3K pursuit world record for the 45 to 49 age group, eclipsing the old record set in 1999 by Kent Bostic. The old record for 3K was 3:21 065, and Mike McCarthy with a very impressive ride that unofficially we're told is 3:16:77. So going just about 4 seconds faster, a little over, in fact, 4 1/4, 4 1/3. And that was about a half hour ago. So congratulations to Mike McCarthy. He was a pro for a number of years, competitive from years 1986 to 1998. Here's some split information, Paul, so we'll see if we can pull that up.
Oh, there you go. Okay, 48, yep.
So as Paul's going to go ahead and digest that, and we'll report those numbers into you. Mike McCarthy on his 3-kilometer ride, he was, I think he was one of the best juniors to come out of the junior category in 1986. I know him and Scott McKinley were the 2 big names that year, and that was a few years after Roy Nickman. So every rider for a few years was kind of cursed with the next Greg LeMond label. So in 83, it was Roy Nickman. In 86, it was Scott McKinley and Mike McCarthy. McCarthy went on to have quite a career. He won domestic road stages, pursuit titles, pro pursuit titles, gold in the individual pursuit in 1990s, I think bronze in 1992. He was a 2-time Olympian in 88 and 96. He was 1990 USA Cycling Athlete of the Year. Again, that was in 90. And then in 2020, Mike McCarthy was inducted into the U.S. Bicycling Hall of Fame. So a storied rider and a great ride. And again, that was about 35 minutes.
Right. And again, congratulations to Mike. I wanted to point out some of the information his coach, Kevin Polton, gave us. He said Mike actually does about 550, 560 watts for his pursuit. And that's about 6.6 watts per kilogram. Now, also in the pursuit, you're not allowed any biofeedback devices, but what Mike does, or what some of the riders do, is put a power meter under their seat. So they can't use it as a pacing device, but they can record the data afterwards. Greg, to my knowledge, does not use a power meter during his ride. He only does it during his training, and then he guesses his lap time and then tries to hold that. Another story I wanted to plug into is the fact that Mike works for Zwift, which is an online training tool. Mm-hmm. And since Kevin Polton lives in, I believe it's Australia, he coached Mike majority of the time through Zwift online, doing workouts on a trainer.
Right. And Kevin said once Mike had kind of circled the date in about 10 months of preparation, I think he did about over 300 hours of indoor training. In addition to any outdoor training, which I don't know of. So yeah, a coach in another continent able to track his performance, and obviously we're not a Zwift commercial, but the fact that that kind of technology allows those kind of relationships nowadays is just amazing.
Yeah, and I know Kenny and I are both also fathers, and sometimes it's an excellent way to do a training ride after you've had a hard day at work. And sometimes you don't have the light or the conditions. We live in Chicago. I'm going to have to go down and do a Zwift ride after this because I haven't trained today. So if anybody's out there tonight, I'll join you.
You may not want to join Paul the day that his brother's doing an hour record, because remember, they're twins, and Paul is no slouch himself. So that's not a good training setup for most people out there, myself included.
Well, now we'll talk a little bit more about the watts. Mike, of course, is a power rider, a big guy with a lot of power. Very good criterium rider, track rider. So his, according to his coach, his 20-minute power is only about 385. And I'm not sure of Mike's weight, but I'm sure it's significantly higher than Greg's, which is about 153 or 155 pounds. So now the spread between Mike's time trial watts of 540, 550, Mike's pursuit watts in the 550 range, and his 20-minute watch, which would be more like his time trial range, is actually quite large. Whereas Greg can actually do a 20-minute power of around 400 watts, only weighing 153, 155 pounds. That wins the World Masters Cycling Time Trial Championships. However, in this event, he's only going to average about 320, 330. That's because the track is much harder. It's hard to hold it in the turns. It's hard to hold your bike straight. The position is quite radical for the aerodynamics. And of course, the altitude gives you about a 50 or 60 watts difference because you just can't breathe as much.
Right. So we all know when you have like recipes when you're cooking and there's high altitude instructions for that, that's because of the thin air. There have to be adjustments. And for riding, there's not exempt to that. When you're that high up, you're a mile, well above a mile actually, when you're a mile up, as Greg is right now, you're dealing with all sorts of different kind of sensations than you would at sea level.
Exactly. And again, as we talked about earlier, the conditions that could have helped Mike, even though they will make Greg more aerodynamic, they might hurt him physiologically. So a hot, humid day would make the aerodynamics better, but it also makes sustaining the effort for the whole hour much more difficult. Let's listen for the lap time. Okay, so I'm hearing some lap times in the Alto Sette, which is 18.6, 18.7. It sounds like he's off the pace now, so because he's consistently getting lap times in the 8.6, 8.7 zone. So if since we know he has to do about 200 laps, what that means is he's got to go he's about 50 seconds short. So if he holds this pace, he's going to be he's going 30 miles an hour. So essentially the minute's worth of riding, and that would be about 4 or 5 laps since he's doing 18-second laps. 20-second laps would be, he'd need 5 more laps at the end to go another kilometer.
Yeah, and I mean, his ride last year that you were at in Colorado, he needs to go 2,500 meters further, 2,532.
Yeah, he's got to go about 2.5 kilometers further. Now, interesting enough, one of the allures of Aguas Calientes is that some coaches and some track experts estimate that the Aguas Calientes track is about 2.5
which would put him
kilometers per hour faster. So he knew that if he could do a ride like he did in Colorado Springs, just the advantage of the track might actually give him the benefit of the faster speed. So
you're saying if he has the same form, fitness, and ride that he did last year in Colorado Springs because of the location of the track, the estimate is that would be a majority of the distance that he needs to go.
Now we're getting some view of the lap times. Can you read those, Kenny?
I can.
They're a little small.
There we go. A little closer. He hears us. So at the 16-minute mark, it's a little dark on the right side.
I'm seeing that the speed actually is about 48.9. So he's about, like we said, about 500 meters short. That'd be about 2 laps short. So he's got to do 49.3, 49.4 to beat the record of the world record. It looks at this pace that he's a little short. Unless he starts feeling better, he's going to have to lift the pace. He's going to be about a half minute to a minute short of breaking the record.
But the thing is it's not just a 3-kilometer individual pursuit. I know you don't want to leave time on the table as we're nearing the halfway point, but sensations change, and if you dig yourself into a hole, it doesn't make it any easier. But we all remember in '89 a 7-hour ride, Le Mans, for 3, 4, 5 hours felt like dropping out, and then the last hour or two came alive to get ahead of Coney Chef and Sean Kelly and Laurent Fignon. So this is a little bit of a different beast in hour, but as Paul talked about earlier on a velodrome, so first of all, 1 hour energy systems, your glycogen, your blood sugars, 40, 50 minutes, that's one thing. Then literally the aero position and the structural support of your arms and fighting that.
It becomes very hard over the hour.
It becomes very hard. And so if he handles that part where maybe it was harder for Norm Elvis, as the current record is 49.392. And so it looks as we're near the halfway point, just slightly off pace. But if he closes with a strong second half, as those energy concerns and the comfort of being in the bars, and you're literally, as you get fatigued, you don't follow as good of a line. You start to wander a little bit. And if other riders, Normal, have wandered, and if Greg's able to concentrate, because remember, he's really good at the time trial. He has proven it this year. And so right now he's going to make it a little bit dramatic for all of us that are watching, and all of us that are watching online live right now as we're nearing half.
Unfortunately, some of the difficulties of riding the faster track
Yep, it's a weird sensation. I've only done a limited amount of riding on a 250. I've ridden obviously 333 Kenosha, the velodrome in Colorado Springs. Here in Chicago, our track is actually about 383 meters long. So, but to do a short event for 250, that I could probably manage. But to do a long event on the 250 is challenging for just staying focused, staying concentrated. And as Paul correctly said, the centrifugal force becomes kind of a sensation that you won't experience.
It's actually an additional muscular challenge. So there's a muscular output on your body, your arms, your neck, your back.
Yeah, you feel like you get sprung into the turn and then shot out of it,
exactly.
like a cannon.
Exactly. It's harder to pace, and it's harder to it's just harder to hold that position. Here's another interesting point about a little nuance to riding the track. Everybody thinks, well, isn't a track just faster than the road? Well, not necessarily. It's regular, but as Ken points out, it's high pressure in the turn, and then you get like a boost out of the turn. You got to watch you don't hit the gas and speed up. It's very hard to pace yourself. Now, again, I said earlier this year the all men's professional row record was broken by Bradley Wiggins. He beat the former world and national time trial champion Alex Dowsett. Now, a lot of people attribute Wiggins' success to the fact that he's such a track expert. He can ride a straighter line. So if you can view on the track, there's actually a black line.
The measurement line.
And that measures the distance. There's actually, if you look at the screenshot, there's maybe 2 or 3 or 4 inches below the measurement line, and then there's a little black block. The black block is a sponge. So the point is, you're supposed to try to ride right on that black line. And if you do, or if you were so skilled that you could ride between the black line and the sponge, you would actually go a slightly shorter distance. Mm-hmm. However, if you hit the sponge, it's going to mess you up and slow you down.
Yeah, so the sponges are actually just ideal because, like, if they didn't have those, they would have to just enforce anybody cheating by going there, and so it's just a built-in, like, it slows you down
so
the right amount.
If you hit the sponge, that's about how much. If you dare to go below the measurement line, if you hit the sponge, that's about how much of a penalty you should get. Now, another thing that I'm going to talk about is if you don't ride straight, if you start to fatigue, if your arms hurt, if your back cramps, if you're not riding straight at the end, you could actually go a significant further amount of distance before the hour is up. So I've seen some estimates, whereas if you're not an expert track rider, over the hour you will ride 200 to 300 meters further just from not riding a dead straight line.
Right.
Now, hopefully Greg is practicing up, but I imagine he's not as skillful as a world and Olympic pursuit champion like Bradley Wiggins.
Yeah, Wiggins obviously coming up with the track heritage and background, and so Greg, a road rider, a road time trialist. It will technically push him to the limit to ride a record attempt on a 250. But the things going forward, as we were talking about earlier in this hour challenge, were that the surface of the velodrome, the elevation, the atmosphere there, maybe not ideal for the longer ride. It certainly favored Mike McCarthy, who just within the last hour set a new Masters world record for the 3-kilometer individual pursuit. So the track is set a record today, and we have crossed into the second half. We'll try to get another split of how things are going, but at last check, it looks as if Greg is just a little bit off the mark because the record right now is Norm Elvis's 49.392 kilometers. And so Greg
Norm set that record this year. So keep in mind, it was literally, I think, a month ago that Norm set this record. Here we're getting another look at the times. We're going to lean in so we can try to see them a little better.
Right.
I think I'm still seeing
lap number. So 103, 104.
And I know I'm seeing, it's tough to see, but I can see 48.
And it just went dark.
I can see 48 and like 48.8, 48.9, and that's the average speed. So that means if he comes in on that, okay, we're going to get another, that's a little closer. Again, he's in the 48.40, 48.405. And I'm hearing Mateo's voice. He said, Otto Quattro, so that's again like a 0.2 of a second below the pace that he needs to do. He did have some 18.6 and 18.7, so there's about just a half second, but a half second multiplied by 200 laps, that's about 50 seconds difference.
Yeah, so the record
about a second difference, or 100 seconds difference.
100 seconds. 49.392 is the record. If you're just joining us right now, we're into the second half of Irishman Greg Swinand's Masters Hour record, and he is riding in Mexico on a 250-meter velodrome that is at approximately 5,400 feet elevation. And as we had already said, Mike McCarthy just set a record in the 3K individual pursuit just under an hour ago on this very track. And now Greg into the second half. He's on pace for a personal best, and he's going to be challenging the record, but it's going to take something very special for him here as we're into about the final 20 minutes of the ride. He needs to ride 49.392 kilometers, and right now his pace is a little bit off of that. The ride that he's going to do is going to be 2.5 kilometers further or so from the previous best that he's ever done. But Paul was talking a little bit ago about how this velodrome, because of the elevation, especially the atmosphere and the track conditions, we estimate that his record, his personal best at the Colorado Springs Velodrome, this track might be worth about 2 kilometers more. So that's why he felt confident to attempt an hour record right here.
Yeah, and quickly, I wanted to just say a moment, for a moment, Greg has gotten some interesting and worthy sponsors from and charities that he wanted to support too. So first, we just like to mention the charities in Ireland. There's Dominican College of Wicklow and the School of St. Jude, and that's on Chigalia Cycling's training homepage. He's also supporting a Chicago-based charity called World Bicycle Relief. That's one that we support as well through SRAM Corporation. Yeah. And our Kenny and I also coach junior cyclists for the Pony Shop Juniors team. And the final charity I wanted to mention was the Irish Cancer Society. So these are all charities that Greg and his team are supporting. And we'd encourage you, if you're on Chigalia Cycling, to support or donate to them as well.
Yeah, we would definitely appreciate that. All three organizations doing great work. And then, as Paul said, here in the Chicagoland, we're definitely familiar with the great work and support the great work of World Bicycle Relief.
Yeah, but in case some of the listeners, most of the listeners are probably cyclists and probably know about World Bicycle Relief. They're in Chicago here. They're actually an offshoot of SRAM Corporation that makes most of the Pro Bike and a lot of the bike components that come on as an OEM product installed already in most of your bikes. But World Bicycle Relief creates bikes that are made for kids in Africa to get to school on. And then they raise money, and for about $200, they can give a kid delivered, signed, sealed, and delivered a new bike. Some kids have to ride 5, 10, even 15 miles to get to school. What they find is that anybody that can't get to school quickly, they have a much higher chance of dropping out. Yeah. And also, this is an interesting point, girls have a much higher percentage dropout rate, because if they have to, boys can walk to school or run to school 10 miles. But guess what? In Africa, you show up and you're all sweaty and dirty and dusty. A lot of schools are, they could be Catholic schools or religious affiliated, or they have to wear uniforms. If you show up all dirty in your uniform, you don't feel like going to school anymore.
Right.
You've got to wash your uniform when you get home every night, and it might be late, it might be after dark. The girls are much more likely to drop out if they cannot ride the bikes to school. So I think I've heard a statistic from World Bicycle League, about 80% of the bicycles go to girls.
Good.
And they have a very high success rate if they do get a bike from them not dropping out.
Think about that. That's not just having fun riding around the neighborhood. Their education may be affected by that.
Or their lives. Yeah, it could be the difference between them being able to get food regularly at the market, or continuing their studies and actually graduating high school and going on to further education.
Yeah.
You know, and I know I'm hearing 8.4, which is again a very good time. He's holding that pretty steady. So that's 18.4. He wanted an 18.2, 18.1 pace in order to be able to do it, break the world record. However, even if he holds this pace, it's not a disaster. He is going to smash his own Irish elite all men's record with this attempt. So let's try to hear the lap times that they're saying to see if he's holding that pace. So again, I think that was an 8.8, which is, again, he's not slowing, but he's not able to pick up the pace. But at the pace or the speed that he's going, he's around 48 kilometers an hour. 4 is still an excellent time, and nothing to sneeze out. And he's going to smash the current Irish record, which is his own, which is a 46. I think it's 46.78.
Yeah, and obviously, I would be hard pressed. Many of us watching here online would be hard pressed even to stay on his wheel. So that's just how fast. You don't even understand that he's just riding faster than like even packs of races go, and riders can go by them in groups, and you would have a hard time even on his wheel. And so, yeah, he's definitely on pace for a personal record, but we're not ready to raise the white flag, because if we know one thing about Greg, it's that he will fight until the end. An update here, we're going to lean into it.
Yeah. And it looks like he's slowing just ever so slightly. So he's got 48.387, 48.382, 48.379. So he's slowing slightly. He's probably having the effects of the heat and altitude, giving him a little bit of physiological stress. Again, if he can hold this pace, usually once you start to slow, it's harder to pick it up. But still, 48.3 would still be an excellent time by any measure.
And I'm just wondering, I know last year on November 21st, he did the record ride, the Irish Elite Hour record at Colorado Springs, and you were there, Paul. And obviously he's been dreaming about this probably since that moment. I know that if you finish up something, and that was on a successful note, and this one, we're into the closing 15 minutes or so. I got to imagine that no matter what the outcome, he's probably going to want to take a look at the data and the information and see what he can do and what his next challenge will be.
Yeah, well, again, it's hard not to feel a little disappointed. Greg's got he's got actually 14 national titles to his name over various times, distances, age categories. He's actually lived in Ireland for about 20 years. Greg and I are actually identical twins. We were born in New Jersey. I raced with Mike McCarthy in the New Jersey and New York area.
And Jamie Carney and Jonas was a little bit younger.
So a lot of interesting
East Coast
track riders.
Right.
Greg moved to Ireland after completing his PhD studies at University of Massachusetts and Boston College. But he's been there for about 20 years. And the European style of racing, longer races, more climbing, more time trialing, has really suited him. Another interesting thing, again, Greg's probably going to be a little disappointed if his record is less than 2 kilometers better. Again, he had estimated that this track might be worth 2 kilometers just from its altitude and its smoothness and its configuration. However, he did actually work on his bike as well. So Planet X and Irish Federation gave him a new bike and they actually went. Matteo Chigala went down with Greg to the velodrome in Milan. I'm sorry, outside of Bergamo, and they actually worked on his position, worked on his aerodynamics. They did several of these, and I think they were expecting that to give him a little bit of boost in his aerodynamics for this ride.
You just gotta love that. You gotta love that he's had all this planning going into it. His great coaching, great support. He's been here dedicated in Mexico for 3 weeks to do final preparations. He's going to obliterate his personal best that he set last year, just about 1 year ago. He's on pace to absolutely obliterate that. And it looks like right now, as we're into the final quarter of an hour of a record attempt for the Masters, our record, the 50-year-old category, that he's falling just behind the very impressive ride that Norm Elvis did just a month ago. We're going to hold on till the very end, though. As long as Greg's not going to quit, we're not going to quit either. And, if he has anything left in the tank,
he's got to give it now.
Yeah, he's got to give it now.
Because 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, the pacing is not.
It's both the hardest, but it's also you got to give your best.
Yeah, the fall off of energy and the fall off of concentration, all those things are naturally you have to combat. But if he has anything left, there's no need to leave it on, which you wouldn't, no matter what the circumstances, whether you were leading because you're going to establish a new best.
Time check here.
And we're leaning forward to take a look at about 42, 43, 44 minutes into it. So we're 3/4 of the way into the ride, and the pace is in that 48.4 and maybe even coming just under 48.4, 48 kilometers and 4/10. So his personal best is 46.8. He did it last year. He did 46.860 kilometers, and he's going to be a full 1.5 kilometers ahead of that. It'll be a new record, so it is a record ride. But right now, it's going to take just about a superhuman effort. The goal is slipping away here on a record ride.
Yeah, just trying to get Ken closer in the shot so you can see his lovely face there.
Nobody wants to see that. If we could just make the screen bigger on the velodrome right now, I can't even imagine what's going on in the mind of Greg. He's
got to be suffering. He's got to be in pain.
Let's just talk about a time trial. You've ridden at a high level for a long time. Your brother now is running at the high level. I did some local time trials. I've ridden on the track as well. You're all in. You're obviously your heart rate is as high as you can sustain for an hour and falling.
Well, the interesting thing on because you're more of a track rider, I know, Ken, is the longer time trials. In a pursuit, you're trying to dig deep and push, and it's sort of instantaneous pain. It's sort of like putting your hand on a hot griddle. It hurts, but you could hold it there for at least 10 or 20 seconds, and then you just worry about the pain that you'd have afterwards. Whereas in the hour type time frame, you're not hurting as much in the same way, but you're sort of running out of energy. So you're trying to dig deep in a different way. You're trying to dig for your energy reserves and saying, come on, give me just one more lap. I can still hold this one more lap. So you're trying to dig in a deeper way, but it's not the acute searing pain. It's more like cramping and losing energy.
So sprinters, that's 200 meters. Kilometer, nicknamed the killer meter. Some would argue that's the hardest effort. I'm going to stick with the hour record is the hardest effort. Ever never done one, but just watching this and imagining what he's going through. So, like when they talk about marathon runners, most marathon runners at the high level run miles faster than anyone can. And they do it for 26 miles.
Correct. They come in, what was it, about a 4:20, right?
Yeah, about a 4:20. And think about that they thought humanly that it was impossible to break 4 minutes. They've edged past that. Someday we're going to have a marathon maybe near that, but that's probably just a little bit off. But the fact is that he's riding an hour at a pace that most people can't even do a lap at. So you have the sprinters that for 200 meters can, I don't know, are they 1,800 watts, 1,900 watts, a kilometer, a 3 kilometer pursuit. The kilometer is really hard because all that time that you lose on the acceleration, you really kind of overcompensate for in the middle, and then you pay for it and try to hold on. So there's literally 3 segments of a kilometer, which is about a minute effort, and the pain and the effort in that, but it's a much higher intensity. An hour record is kind of that fine line of balancing, and I can't think of anything, you know, mountain climbing is hard. I was bad at that. Cyclocross is hard. I was bad at that. Sprinting was good, hard. I was good locally, but he is riding what most people would say is the hardest thing in cycling. 1 hour at your maximum.
I would actually point out the famed Eddie Merckx, when he finished his hour record, he said that that was the hardest ride he ever did. And of course, he won numerous stages in the Giro, the Vuelta, the Tour, the World Championships 3 times. He was a 5-time winner of the Tour. I think it was a 6-time winner of the Giro and a 3-time winner of the Vuelta.
Won all 3 Grand Tour.
But the record number of total Grand Tour wins, and an incredible win percentage. I think Merckx had a 38% win percentage in a sport where most people would be happy to manage a 3%
handful
win
of wins a year, right?
But Merckx said that the hour was the hardest he ever did. Some people thought that it somehow changed him. And it could have been that the training was so specific that it made him more of a steady state only rider or something, but it might have taken out some of his punch.
And then some will say that his career jumped the shark or was never the same after he was punched in the abdomen in the climbs in the Alps. So either way, but I wouldn't doubt that. It's something like this kind of effort. You know, Greg LeMond was quoted as saying that each time he finishes a Tour de France, he hypothesized that, he said that it takes a year off your life. And that's just kind of probably how he felt the days after it. So, you know, I don't know if you do 5 tours or 10 tours, if you're going to live 10 years less. But there's just that perception.
Here we got another time check.
All right, so we're coming.
And so they're coming pretty steady, 48.4, 48.399 to 48.399. So his pace is not falling, which is actually exciting.
In fact, even creeping back up there for a moment.
A little faster.
And so he's got 10 minutes to go, and he's about on pace for a kilometer, about 1,000 meters short. But again, well ahead of his best. I mean, he's going to set a new record for the Irish elites. He's going to still.
And don't forget, at 50 kilometers an hour, almost 50 kilometers an hour, a kilometer short is only, like I said, about 50 seconds.
Right.
It's about 50 seconds short, or excuse me, a minute. It's a little bit more than a minute, maybe a minute 10 seconds short.
And I definitely want to say this because I feel this, that these kind of things, records, they, you know, so he's going to have a record today for sure. Another record was set earlier today with Mike McCarthy. They inspire people. They inspire people to ride. They inspire people to challenge the records. They inspire people to do things. We're doing this because other riders set records before, and they inspire us even to this day. And Greg is definitely inspiring hundreds, if not thousands.
I have to say, although I'm slightly biased being his twin brother, I was definitely inspired to keep training even as a 50 or turning 50 this year. And I actually, as I said before, have used a lot of Zwift just for the fact that I live in Chicago and also have a lot of personal commitments with my work and family. And I was able to raise my threshold, 20-minute threshold power this year. So again, if you know somebody else can do it, you can, even if you're never going to reach that level, you can say, hey, maybe I still got something new to do, something new to try, something new to learn. We can always do something, and maybe it's not, we're still getting older, but you can still grow in other ways.
Yeah, I mean, no question. I mean, in fact, today's 3-kilometer pursuit record that was eclipsed was formerly held by a rider who inspired me. It was Kent Bostic held the Masters 3-kilometer pursuit, and he had set.
I thought you would have been inspired by Mike since you're a track rider.
And Mike's Ken had actually set a number of records. So he held the 3-kilometer pursuit up until about an hour and 10 minutes ago at 3:21:065, and it was eclipsed by Mike McCarthy on this track here right before Greg Swinand took to the track. Here we have another
time
update coming in. So we're at the
48 again.
Yeah, in fact, it's creeping up. So he's fighting. I love it. There's that spirit because he was ebbing down to 48.39, 48.38, and now it's back up to 48.41. So he's got fight left into him. There's about 8 minutes left on an hour record ride. He's going to set a record. And the cheering is now coming from his coach, Matteo, as Greg Swinand is attempting to set a world hour record for the Masters. And at this point, 53 minutes into it, he is going to apparently fall short of a record that was set 1 month ago by Norm Alvis, the record of 49.392. But Greg is on pace for a personal best. He's on pace for a new Irish elite record, not even Masters yet. He is a world time trial champion this year in the Masters races. And so
Greg is actually an Irish, he's a dual citizen, American and Irish. Now, had Norm Alvis been from another country, he could have maybe taken out the American record.
Right.
But of course, Norm Alvis is an American, so the current American record is the world record. Just wanted to also mention some of Greg's sponsors since we've got a few more minutes. And I think probably what's happened is Greg did a fast pace in the beginning. He realized is just by feel, because he is a very experienced time trials, maybe it was a little bit much, so he didn't go out too hard. Was able to settle down to a slightly lower pace. Now he's able to pick it up just slightly, but he's going to have a solid time, but it doesn't look like it's going to beat Norm Alvis's record. But real quick, I wanted to run through some of those sponsors. Abundant Venture Partners here in Chicago gave Greg some support to get down to Mexico. Redwood Design has helped out. Planet X Bikes has helped Greg for a number of years. Neenan Travel Cycling in Ireland made some arrangements and also helped with the airfare. Chigalia Cycling, that is Greg's coach and friend, great guy, former Italian pro cyclist. You see him on the side of the track there shouting out the lap times and everything.
He's definitely picking up the pace. If you're watching us live right now, you can see the coach is yelling. He's giving him the splits, and Greg is picking up the pace. But we do know that it looks like it's going to be a matter of a little too late. But we're going to see an increase in his average speed. And Paul, you had more.
Yeah, we also wanted to thank High Five Sports Nutrition, Black Rose, No Pins, Aero Coach, and Usher Insulation. I've actually got an Usher jersey in my basement. Greg gave it to me a number of years ago. That's a team that Greg used to ride for, and a gentleman that supported Irish cycling for a number of years. Greg and Matteo both now ride for the Irish pro cycling team, Aqua Blue Sport. So that's their road cycling team. But these are the sponsors that have supported Greg in this hour record attempt in Mexico.
Yeah, we're glad you're all here, and we hope to have more interaction with you, some comments. And we haven't been able to actually stream through the comments because we're just trying to focus on his ride right now. But Greg Swinand in the closing moments here.
Okay, I'm hearing some faster lap times. That was Octodue, that's 18.2. So he's picking it back up to the pace that he needed to hold to beat the record. I imagine he's going to get a little faster, but that he doesn't have enough time left in the hour to actually pick up the distance that he needs to go.
And now it'll just be like sheer desperation to set his known bar as high as he can. Of course, Greg Swinand right here, the current Irish national champion, world record holder. He's going to set a new mark here. We're in the closing minutes, and we will see his average speed rise as he is on pace for just over 48.4 kilometers, and he's riding in Mexico. This is coming to us live, and we're just about 5:30 Chicago time. I believe it's about
the same time.
Same time in Mexico.
Aguas Calientes.
Aguas Calientes, a velodrome that is 250 meters long. It is at elevation. It's about 1,800 meters elevation. So he's over a mile high, and he's doing a tremendous ride. We're waiting for the final couple minutes here where his pace will be above 48.4 kilometers. It'll eclipse his record that he did set last year, and it's an Irish hour record hold for the all categories, elite category, and it was 46.860 is his old record. So he will set a new record, but he was also hoping to get an hour record for the Masters, and it looks as if he's going to be about a kilometer, maybe even a little less now, because he's going to definitely dent into that. The record is 49.392.
The time check. Look on here, was it 8.3 maybe.
Maybe.
So I'm just gonna say we've probably got just a few minutes left here, and I know a lot of you are watching live. I'm not feeling any disappointment at all because I think this has been an incredible experience. And I've been following Greg and chatting with Matteo over the internet, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed is one of my teammates here in Chicago is actually from Mexico, and his son races with us in cyclocross. He connected Greg with a number of friends of his in Mexico, and Kenny and I both have the pleasure or the privilege of coaching some junior teams, including the Pony Shop and some of the young riders at our local track, the Northbrook Velodrome. And Greg actually did some coaching and talking to juniors down in Mexico, and put that on the internet
Just a couple days ago.
that kind of tickled my heart that he was able to connect with some juniors down in Mexico.
So hopefully he's going to inspire just even some local talent there, some local riders, some family and friends out east, and new friends and acquaintances from his 20 years of being in Ireland, and certainly a number of us in Chicago that are watching him.
The teammate that I mentioned is Al Reyes. His son is actually an engineer at SRAM, and he's actually one of the top cyclocross racers in our local cyclocross
he's the
series.
state champion. So he's won our series 3 times the last 4 years.
But I'm hoping that maybe Al can connect us with some juniors that would want to have an exchange with us. So this could become. Let's listen.
So he has just crossed over the line, and we'll get a final split here of the time. Just coming across the line and finishing up about 30 seconds ago. I'm estimating that he came in at just above 48 kilometers, 0.4. So he's gone almost 48.5 kilometers. He set a new Irish hour record. Our goal, of course, was even bigger things. He set a new personal best. He's gone about 1,500 meters, about 1.5 kilometers further than he did on November 21st, 2016. So on the year that Greg Swinand has claimed a world title on the time trial in France on the road, he has set a new record for the 2nd year running. And congratulations to Greg Swinand.
Congratulations.
And certainly, and it looks like the hour record stays with Norm Elvis at 49.392 for the Masters for the hour record, and we'll have a final total here soon.
They actually have to, as I said before, they actually have to calculate
the last lap.
So the way it works is they shoot a gun, and then they time you on your last lap from where the gun went off to how long, to when you hit the finish line.
Unless, of course, you finished at 1 hour at the finish line. But obviously,
right
there's a 250 meters. There's only a 1 in 250.
It's only 18. The worst possible scenario would be is if you cross the finish line by a fraction of a second, the gun went off, and then you had to sprint another lap.
So he's just gone about 3 or 4 laps cool down. It's literally like a jet on a runway. I mean, he needs a long way to decelerate, and what's going through his mind. He's got to be
that bike 54, 55, 13. That's a big gear. He's got to ease off a little. Again, when he finished his Colorado Springs ride, he could barely get off the bike. His body was cramping more than his legs, and that was because of the centripetal force pushing him into the turns and pulling down on his body. You also can't. You got to imagine when you're on the time, you can't
ride like
scratch your nose. In a road race, you can kind of rub your eye if you're sweating, or maybe blow a little nose blow on the handlebars. On the track, you can't even twitch your lips, or you're going to go off the line and go off the track.
And so no water bottle, no hydration.
No water bottles, no hydration.
Because just the breaking of the tuck, the benefits from hydrating, which would be enormous, with the time cost of breaking out of the tuck to go to a jersey pocket or wherever you would have one frame on the bike.
And you might actually crash.
And you might actually crash. On a 250, you probably would crash. So it's an incredible effort. It's incredible. It doesn't matter what sport you love. It's an incredible physiological accomplishment to ride maximum sustained effort for 1 hour. It is a record ride for him, and 2 records have been set today on the velodrome. So congratulations to Mike McCarthy, setting a new 3-kilometer record for the Pursuit Masters, 45 to 49.
3 minutes 16 is an incredible time.
16:77.
To give you an idea of how good Mike's time was,